Chapter 7, Part 2. In Washington, the manhunt had progressed little. John Wilkes Booth had assassinated the president almost 48 hours before, but the manhunters had no solid leads. Yes, the police, detectives, and officers had found a number of leads on Booth's accomplices, but none led to Booth. Hats, the Derringer pistol, abandoned knives, broken revolvers, jackets, one-eyed horses, bank books, mysterious letters, hotel registers, notes to vice presidents, trunks, ropes, spurs, bridles, saddles, and eyewitness accounts were all fine clues that made the assassin seem very vivid and near. These would make good evidence at a criminal trial as proof of identity and guilt. The evidence already collected by April 15th confirmed that it was Booth who had shot Lincoln, and that he seemed to have several accomplices. The contents of Azerott's room at the Kirkwood, plus Booth's Sam letter, suggested that the vice president had also been marked for death. The evidence pointed to Booth's guilt, but not to how he planned to make his escape. Booth could be anywhere. Many false sightings across the country made the pursuit more difficult. With each passing hour, Booth's trail grew a little colder. Soon he would disappear forever. Booth's skill at avoiding the manhunters increased the government's embarrassment over its failure to find him. On the night of April 16th, Stanton had no idea of John Wilkes Booth's location or destination. Yes, it was probably Booth who gave the name Booth to Sergeant Cobb at the bridge and fled into Maryland. But where did he go after that? On Monday, April 17th, Thomas Jones appeared to go about his business as usual. He did his chores and ate his usual breakfast. He grabbed some bread, butter, and ham, filled a flask with coffee, and stuffed everything into his pockets. He folded the newspapers and stashed them in his coat. He carried a basket of corn on his arm to throw off any Union troops he might encounter. If stopped and questioned, he could claim that he was on his way to feed his hogs, which ran free in the woods. A little before 10 a.m., Jones rode toward the pine thicket. About 100 yards from Booth's camp, Jones dismounted, walked slowly, and whistled the secret signal as he came within earshot of the assassins. Booth and Harold welcomed him, and the food he brought, with open arms. Booth was especially eager to see the other treats Jones brought, the newspapers. At last, 3 long days after the assassination, he could read about his history-making actions and how they were reported to the nation. He must have delighted in reading the details of the assassination as reported in the papers, as though reading the reviews of a performance. Booth's pleasure at reading about his success in killing Lincoln could not hide his worsening condition. His leg was in bad shape, and Booth was obviously in great pain. As Jones discussed the escape plan with Booth and Harold, he became distracted when he heard a familiar and terrifying sound in the distance. Clanking metal and horses' hooves pounding the earth. Instantly, Jones recognized the sound. Cavalry sabers clapping the saddles of Union troops riding in their direction. It was too late for them to try to hoist Booth onto a saddle and to attempt escape. A fight was out of the question. Booth could not walk, Jones was unarmed, and Harold had never been in a battle before. With only 2 revolvers and 1 carbine, they couldn't hold off a patrol of Union cavalry for long. The 3 men hugged the ground and held their breath. The cavalry horses got within 200 yards. It was Booth's closest brush with capture since he galloped down the alley behind Ford's Theater. Luckily for Booth, instead of turning into the thicket, the troops remained on the road, passed the thicket, and rode until the sound of hoofbeats vanished in the distance. Jones locked eyes with Booth. "You see, my friend, we must wait." "Yes," Booth agreed. I leave it all with you." On the morning of the 17th, another man waited, too. Troops still had not called on Dr. Mudd to pursue his tip, because they still did not know about it. It wasn't until the next afternoon that George Mudd rode into Bryanstown. He made a vague report to Lieutenant Dana. 2 suspicious strangers visited his cousin's farm, seeking medical attention. Then, in another unbelievable stroke of good luck for Booth and Harold, Dana ignored the news as old and unimportant. He thanked George Mudd and sent him on his way. He did not send troops to Mudd's farm to investigate. Distracted by other leads, many of them dead ends, Lieutenant Dana ignored the one tip that placed Lincoln's assassin within his reach. When soldiers had not come by his farm by that evening, Dr. Mudd relaxed. Perhaps at this point they would not come at all. With the assassin's trail in Maryland growing cold, the soldiers would soon leave and shift the action to other places far from Bryantown and his farm. Thomas Jones had experienced enough excitement for one day. He agreed to return to the thicket to feed Booth and Harold the next morning. But he refused to bring horse feed again. It was difficult to carry enough feed for the horses, and Jones feared a passing cavalry patrol would hear their horses, which were hungry, restless, and noisy. The horses had served them well, and Harold loved animals, but they all agreed that the horses must be disposed of. The horses' reward for faithful service was death. Harold led them to a quicksand pit about a mile away, shot them, and then sank their bodies. Harold returned to the thicket and sat on the ground beside Booth. Never during their escape were they more vulnerable and alone. If the Union cavalry found them now, they would not be able to make a run for it. Exhausted and injured, Booth could not hope to outrun a mounted pursuit. And if Thomas Jones abandoned them, how would they find a way to cross the river? Later, in the safety of the night, Booth and Harold rolled out their woolen blankets and slept another night on the ground.